Bobby, welcome to SpyCast. I know you were here recently for the press conference regarding the Kryptos auction.
Yeah, the press conference at the Spy Museum was fantastic. We had a lot of media there, and the executive director, introduced us, and so we were very grateful for that. And there's a lot of excitement about Kryptos.
So, to get started, how much did you know about Kryptos before you started this process?
I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about Kryptos, and I had to learn pretty fast. The first thing is that Kryptos is a sculpture that's at Langley at the CIA, but it's enclosed. You can't. The public can't see it. It's part of an art installation that's for the employees of the CIA. So the general public can't see Kryptos. How I found out even that Kryptos existed was we had a client who buys vintage computers from us. He lives in Spain, and we were talking to him, and he said, I'm obsessed with Kryptos and K4, and you guys should auction it. And I'm like, what? What are you even talking about? And then he explained who Jim Sanborn was, and he explained what the Kryptos installation was and where it was. It was in the CIA headquarters, and that. On the installation, on the sculpture, are four secret messages, and three of them uh, were solved already by the members of the CIA and NSA, people that were able to see the sculpture. The public couldn't do it, but three of them were solved. But the fourth one, what they call K4, has mystified the public and cryptologists and people that are trying to crack it. It's become a challenge, like the greatest secret. It's a CIA secret. But it's a piece of art, a living, breathing piece of art. So when we learned about that, and then we learned about Jim Sanborn, the artist, who was approaching his 80th birthday, and he's been contacted for years and years and years about what does it say. And also, people have been submitting wrong answers every week for 35 years.
I heard that he
You
started charging $50 per submission of people trying to crack it.
I know, because he just gets flooded. And it's gotten to the point for him at 80, I need this to stop. I mean, I want the artwork to continue to live, which K4 and Kryptos does, because it is still challenging, And so when you gaze upon a piece of artwork and you really don't know what what three-quarters of it says, but there's a quarter of that piece of artwork that you can't possibly understand until you're able to get the answer.
And how are members of the public attempting to solve it if they couldn't see the sculpture? Is it just because there's now so many images online that they were like, we feel like we're there, we can try and figure it out?
That's right. So over the years, photos leaked out of Kryptos installation, and the four panels have been transcribed by people. So it's 96 characters, and it's been encrypted by a cipher that only Sanborn and the guy he worked with to encrypt the message. So over the years, people have seen it and tried to crack it. But one of the things is, like, Sanborn got so frustrated that people couldn't crack it. He started to give away clues. And so he just, okay, look, it says Berlin clock in this position. So, there was certain, and he gave out another clue over the years to, like, please,
Someone do this.
yeah, at least a guide. Maybe they could reverse engineer it. Because the coding charts were sophisticated enough that the code breakers could not break this one. And it's interesting. And I was at the Spy Museum. You guys have so many Enigma machines and so many
Mm.
cool coding machines. So you can just imagine what in between what he wrote down and what's on that sculpture is this Enigma machine that would decode it, but it's understanding his coding charts and then the plain text.
Yeah.
So
I was going to say, yeah, so take me back to when you first met Jim and just started
well,
discussing this.
so we were talking to this client, and he told us to reach out to Jim Sanborn. Because Sanborn had been telling the New York Times, I'm going to auction this. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. So we reached out to him, and Bobby Eaton, my colleague at our auction, flew down to see Jim. Jim said, "Come down and talk to me about it." And Bobby spent the afternoon with Jim and went over everything and how we would handle this. Because we needed to learn what is it we're actually going to auction off, and because we typically and still do we auction physical tangible objects. We don't sell secrets, right?
Mm,
We don't. That's not what we sell. We sell the piece of paper the secret is written on. That's what we were going to sell, was just the plain text, the piece of paper that had the 96 character message on it that he originally wrote. So Sanborn was all like, "Yes, let's auction it." He wanted to find what he calls a new Kryptos keeper, someone that's going to, keep this going, keep it alive. But he doesn't want to have to answer the
mm.
questions anymore, and doesn't want to have to give the answer. But he wanted to find the right person to take over this challenge. But so that was what Sanborn really wanted, to transfer the responsibility of the artwork to a new owner, and
Mm.
auction seemed like the way for him to go. And so uh, he decided to go with RR Auction.
But can you run me through exactly what Sanborn decided to sell for the person who was going to purchase this entire archive? What exactly would they be getting?
So they would be getting the physical piece of paper that has the 96 characters on it, that's called K4 now. They'd also get the coding charts that were used to encrypt it. So meaning the person would be able to reverse engineer and be able to get from the original 96 characters, go through the coding chart, and then understand what's on the installation. So they would get that. And then he also had the original pieces of K1, K2, K3. So, and the coding charts. And I think that that's very valuable too. And then he had a prototype, a small section of what Kryptos would look like that he made, that he presented to the United States government when he got the contract to actually install this piece of artwork into the Langley headquarters at CIA. And you also got the contract he signed, and you also got his CIA badge that he had to wear. He told me they followed me around everywhere. Anytime I was on there, he had like someone watching him. Even if he went into the men's room, there was somebody with Sanborn. That's how top secret Langley is. And, with these artists. And so, it's a fabulous archive of materials that Sanborn had. And that's what we were selling. Now, the other thing that the person got though was an afternoon with Sanborn. That was part of the appeal, because Jim Sanborn, the artist, for the first time is going to sit down with the winning bidder and explain to them the Kryptos as a whole, what K2, K3, K4 all together mean, what the message is, because it's not just the four separate messages, but they're all intertwined. My interpretation, your interpretation might be totally different than what he created. And so that knowledge he's transferring to the new keeper. But that's not something, all I can sell, all our auction can offer is, here's an afternoon with Sanborn. You know, that's it. But what the knowledge in his head, that's not something that we could,
Mm.
transfer title to, right? That has to be an experience. So that was a real special part of it. Also, in the archive materials, there was two unique new things that he told me about. He has an alternate K1 message and coding charts, and he's got an alternate K4 message and coding charts. Now, the alternate K4 is now known as K5. So that is brand new, and nobody's ever even seen the encrypted text.
So, in early September of this year, Sanborn was contacted by two men who believed that they had the plain text to K4. They believed they had figured out the encrypted text. Can you explain what happened?
Well, first off, they didn't figure out, they didn't unencrypt anything. And it's very important before we talk about that. The encryption method, how it was encrypted, uh, you know, how you solve the puzzle is very, very important. So Well, what Sanborn did, because I never took possession of the actual archive of materials or the coding charts, when I asked him, okay, what are we, like you just asked me, well, what are we selling? Okay, you're going to get the plain text. And he goes, and you're going to get copies of the coding charts. And he's being transparent. He says, because the originals are in the Smithsonian. And I put that on the website in the description, and we got all this media. And suddenly he calls and says, I've just been contacted by these two guys. They went down the Smithsonian. They found some clues and were able to reassemble the original plain text because I had. Uh, so what Sanborn had done after he installed, or around the time he installed the actual sculpture, the CIA said, "Hey, what does it say on there? Are you making a political statement? Is there a dirty joke on here? We got to know what it says." And so what happened was he cut up several pieces of the message that he could show to his handlers at the CIA that it was, that it was a good message, but it wasn't something to be concerned about. An archivist had gone and sorted everything, and Sanborn did not realize that these pieces of the paper were in his archive. And so they were able to go to the Smithsonian, and took pictures of these. They were able to figure out what the message was, and they paid their $50, submitted it, and then wrote to Sanborn and says, this is what it says, and we don't want to hurt your auction. And so Sanborn calls me up and like immediately, after seeing 35 years of wrong answers, he saw the right answer. We talked about it, and it's like we've got to disclose, that these guys found this in your archive. And Sanborn says, "Well, I got to go down to the Smithsonian. I got to seal the paper so nobody else gets it." So he did that. I took off copies, off the description he had given me, and we went and sealed the papers. These two researchers told Sanborn that they would be cool and not release the plain text. But what I wanted was an NDA. Like, okay, be cool. Don't mess with Sanborn's auction. Sign this piece of paper so that I could give it to the winning bidder, or to assure the public you guys aren't going to release this thing. But they wouldn't do it. So then I said, well, look, Sanborn, I'm in a transactional business. I work for an auction company. We hire consultants, we hire researchers, we hire authenticators. This is all part of what we do. So I said, offer them a piece of the action. That apparently didn't go over well with these guys, and they got very upset that would happen. And then they called the New York Times and gave them the answer.
Oh, they told the New York Times what it was.
My understanding is they read it to them over the phone. And so the New York Times then has an obligation to do what I was going to do, which was to inform the public that this had happened, and which we did. So we had made an announcement not only on our website but to the press that these guys had found were able to reassemble the plain text and had said they weren't going to release it. And my point to these researchers is like, you guys are heroes. You tipped him off. Let's seal the papers, and let's have Sanborn, have a payday. I never spoke to these guys directly, but that was the message, and they didn't like that either.
Yeah.
So they decided to call the New York Times, and luckily the New York Times is was respectful of Sanborn and his rights, and didn't publish. So that's what's kind of happened with that.
Yeah. So even though, you think it did slightly damage the auction, it was estimated prior to the auction that, this archive could go for between $300,000 to $500,000, but the actual price was set at $962,000. Were you surprised by this? Did you really think it could have gone for more than this or less than this? What figures were you thinking of?
Well, it absolutely was going to go for a lot more, because we had people, because of the New York Times article, decide not to bid. It's
Mm.
regrettable. So I think it would have gone for a lot more, but we're satisfied with what happened. But I do think it would have gone for a lot more, and the people that won it got a good deal.
So, how did the auction play out?
It was really amazing. When we first announced it, when in August, before we had ever written the description, Kryptos is one of these mythological mysteries, and it's been written about. There's documentaries about it. So when he announced this, we had major media attention that wanted. Wow, Sanborn's finally going to reveal this mystery. So we had lots and lots of we had lots of people from around the world registering. Um, but then, because he announced it several months before the actual sale, typically we don't do that because I couldn't take a bid because I still didn't know what we were selling. But anyway, um, but then when we opened the auction, it started slowly. I think we started at 25,000 and 50,000, sat there, and then 100,000, and then sat there, and then um I think that the night of the auction or the day of the auction it was around 200,000, 220,000. So the last there was four really serious bidders on it, and usually you like to have two, but when you have four, you're going to have a good thing. So we knew we were going to get to that 300,000 to 500,000,
Mm.
right? So we kind of closed the gallery door at 7 p.m. If you didn't bid before 7, you're not getting in. So
Mm.
the last hour was pretty exciting because uh, these two parties that were left were battling it out. The auction is thrilling, up, and it's we call it the highest of high and the lowest of low. Sometimes we we really exceed expectations. Other times we fail. It's a disaster, but we try to keep it even keel. And but we were really excited for Sanborn to be able to raise that kind of money for him so he can deal with some of his issues, and also really happy with who ended up with it. So, which I couldn't tell him either. I
Yeah.
mean, but have to respect both parties at this point, and not reveal. Our auction's responsibility is that physical, tangible archive. That's what we're selling. So the secret is with them,
Mm.
and now they can do with it. But I know that it's not going to get buried away, and I know it's not going to be released publicly.
So, the Kryptos archive wasn't the only group of items that was being sold off at the auction. Can you describe what else you sold? I know there was talks of Rosetta Stone papers and Enigma machines.
Yeah, we sell more Enigma machines than any other auction house, and we've been getting, between 200 and $500,000 for them. By the way, the Spy Museum almost has a monopoly on them. They've got so many; they're so fabulous. And so, yeah, we sold two different types of Enigma machines, both one pre-war and one wartime, for several $100,000 each, which was fantastic. And they work. It's. Have you played with the Enigma machines at the
I
Spy
haven't
Museum?
personally, no.
You should go down there and get one of the working ones because it's very mechanical. It's like, yeah, it's like Swiss made. No, it's very well made machines. They still work if you've got the light bulbs and the batteries, and you can type in a coded message, and it will unencrypt it for you by switching the rotors and putting it. So we had a couple of those, and they're fantastic. The other archive that we sold for over $100,000 was some of the working papers used to decrypt the hieroglyphics, Egyptian hieroglyphics, what they call the Rosetta Stone. As you know, um, well, I actually didn't know this. Did you know that was Napoleon's troops, the French, are the ones that found the Rosetta Stone when Napoleon decided, I'm going to invade Egypt, and Napoleon took like 50 scientists and people with him to document antiquities because Napoleon was a collector too, and then Napoleon loses to the English, and so the English grab the Rosetta Stone and take it to London, where it is now today. So we have an original rubbing of the top half of the Rosetta Stone, and then we have the working papers of Sir Thomas Young, the English scientist that was uh, racing to decrypt hieroglyphics, working papers with pencil notations where they're um, actually translating the hieroglyphics to the Coptic, and then breaking the code of hieroglyphics. So we also had hieroglyphics and things from Champollion, the French uh, guy who decrypted the Rosetta Stone. So and those sold well too. So yeah, we just had a great spy auction with all kinds of amazing artifacts and letters, and so
Why
it was fabulous.
why do you think people are so fascinated by the code breaking world? And can you kind of speak to the importance? And I will obviously reference the Spy Museum here, like what is the importance in upholding the history and legacy of this kind of thing?
Well, I think since there was written communications, probably before there was written communications, things were done in code. Military secrets were forever encoded. You didn't want your opponents knowing what your plans were, how many troops you have, or what the weather was. So I think through time immemorial, there's been coding, and the is it Sudoku, whatever, people, crossword puzzles. They Humans have that brain, they're fascinated with trying to solve that puzzle, you know, whatever that is, that I want to know what it says, right? So I think there's this fascination to try to break the code, and with Kryptos, by the way, it's installed in the garden of the CIA where the code breakers are working all day, probably breaking codes that the Russians and the Chinese and who knows who else, and then they go out in the courtyard and challenge to do this. And so this is this passion to unencrypt messages, because you can write something normal and it comes out garbled, right? And to be able to ungarble that, is quite the challenge. And I think it's in human nature to try to listen in, find out the secret. How many military troops are there? What are their plans? And so throughout military history, there are coded messages. And I think I saw some. You have some at the Spy Museum. There's some Revolutionary War coded messages. By the way, your exhibit there is really complete, really fantastic. I really enjoy my time there.
Nice, thank you. Now, finally, tell me just in general about some of the most fascinating things that have come across your radar in this business. Like, I know you said you sold a lot of rare manuscripts and documents that have been encoded, and I'm just kind of wondering what else has come across your desk.
We've specialized in manuscripts and documents, and there has been coded uh, messages that we've sold. But I want to tell you my very, very, very favorite object, because it was in a foreign language for me. I had to unencode it. We had this picture. That famous picture of Einstein with his tongue sticking out, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the most famous photo of Albert Einstein. And I had just started at the auction house, and one of my colleagues opens up this box, and out comes this museum quality silver gelatin print, oversized, of Einstein with his tongue sticking out, and on it he has written something in German, and I am like, what is that? What does that say? And uh, one of my colleagues, of course, puts it into Google Translate or something, and it's totally garbled. Like I needed a cipher to understand what it said. It didn't make any sense, and so at the time, uh, we didn't pay to have a professional translator. But in this case, I said, listen, because they wanted the consignor to pay it. And the consignor had bought this at another auction for $8,000. All the money she had bought this because she knew it was valuable. And so we got to translated, and Einstein on there in German had written basically, this gesture is aimed at all humanity. Albert Einstein, so he was sticking his tongue out at the world, and he knew, and he knew the power of that image, which I thought was So fascinating. And if you go and if you track down the original photo, it's a press photo. It was his birthday. He was a professor at Princeton, but he was so world famous, Einstein, that he had paparazzi. And one of the cameramen said, Professor Einstein, give us a smile for your birthday. And he sticks his tongue out for a split second, and one of the guys gets it. And there's Einstein with his tongue sticking out. But if you see the photo, he's sitting next to an elderly couple. So Einstein actually sees it in the newspaper, writes to the guy, says, listen, I like that picture of me, but can you crop out my friends and send me a print? And this is what I have in my hands that says, so this is Einstein's own personal copy of the most famous photo of him ever taken. Einstein with his tongue sticking out. And wouldn't you know it, 7, 8 weeks later, after they said she spent that 8 grand, we sold it for $125,000.
Wow.
Because you know why? Because we unencoded, we decrypted Einstein's message to the world. By translating that German. So that's my that's my favorite.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
absolutely amazing. Well, Bobby, it's been so fascinating having you on today. Thank you so much.
Oh, I'm so grateful. Thank you.